Hey everyone, Kevin here, and welcome back to my channel. I am currently in the process of creating a new training at work, and the SMEs and stakeholders asked me to include some assessments to gauge if learners actually got the material. And it made me realize that most assessments in corporate training these days are actually kind of pointless, and they just don't really assess what they're supposed to. I mean, the same could apply to K through 12 education as well, now that I think about it. But you might be surprised that I almost never include assessments in courses I make these days because they're generally used to check a box rather than be something meaningful. And that probably flies in the face of what many would see as common sense because I'd expect the response, well, how do you know that they learned the material without giving them a test? Easy. I see if their behavior ends up changing on the job. I see if that behavioral change also solves the original training problem which brought the stakeholders to us in the first place. I see if the company as a whole has improved after the learning has been administered by noting if there's been better efficiency within the targeted roles on top of all of that. Now, true, that often takes time to observe on the job and requires review and evaluation of lots of data weeks or even several months later. But with the vast majority of training, learners just need straightforward explanations on what they need to know, and then they'll be fine. And let's be honest, most assessments fail because they're either poorly designed or aren't measuring anything that actually matters to the learner or the business. This can be seen with how stakeholders always ask for assessments to see if people understood the training, even though any L&D practitioner can tell you that understand isn't a measurable objective for anyone to meet. It's a nebulous criterion statement because there's no way to know what degree someone understood something. This is exactly why things like multiple choice and out the door type questions rarely ever accomplish what people think they do. Why? Because you're merely testing rote memorization rather than how the employee performs their job or if they can do what the training is preparing them for. This is echoed in the episode I did a while back about how I dislike gamification and learning with things like Kahoot because you're testing rote memorization and how fast someone can press a button, for instance, rather than do something tangible and relevant beyond the game itself. Which is why it's important to note that if done right, assessments can be very useful to include in lessons. They can ensure compliance by fulfilling your yearly mandatory training requirements, measuring skill gaps, and monitoring performance to identify knowledge gaps, competence, and assessing training ROI, along with improving overall retention, which will eventually allow them to take that new information and apply it on the job. I mean, heck, especially when combined with the growing prevalence of AI based tools that churn out poor quality assessment questions more often than not. There's a lot to take in there, but what people don't realize is that these types of questions often demotivate the people taking the exam, since they will see them as a waste of time because they tend to be divorced from reality and not applicable to their job. But I guess all of this begs the question, when should we use assessments then? Which is admittedly a valid question because we can never just totally do away with them. Well, I'll say this first because it's the most obvious answer. Use more scenario and simulation based practice questions. Yeah, I know not every training needs them, and that they are time consuming to make, so not all companies are doing that. But having learners actually attempt to do what they're being asked to is always a much better and more practical application of the information they've received on the job. Branching scenarios that take them through workflows and actually click on examples of the buttons and use the programs they'll need to is such a better way of achieving the objectives and makes learners value the training too. Oh, and this includes role playing as well if it's something like instructor led training, so keep that opportunity in mind as well. Basically, these assessments meet them where they are and don't waste their time. On top of that, build in a process which does two more things: a system of continuous feedback using formative assessments on the job to grow employees' skills and error correct anything that pops up which they don't need to understand or need reminders of, rather than demanding all of their success on a single exam that probably doesn't even measure what it claims to. Along with that, routinely follow up to see if they're doing all right with the content after training. Ask learners what kind of individualized extension courses, QRGs, or guides you can provide for them to learn more on their own or clarify any misunderstandings they have. Self-guided and individualized learning really can do a lot if you manage it well, because it places the onus on the learner to be more productive and efficient with the material we supply them during training, rather than just giving them this one and done multiple choice test, which doesn't help us or any other ID fits training that isn't working. It's meaningless data when done that way, and again, why I've generally stopped including assessments in my courses. As a teacher, I saw the decreasing utility and failure of high stakes testing to measure anything worthwhile that we could use to improve the academic achievement of our students. And that background bled over into instructional design when I changed careers, where I began noticing the same problem, just packaged in a bit of a different way. It's our job as IDs to make training that solves training problems and makes learners change behavior on the job. And we need to verify that every aspect of our courses is actually doing that, assessments included. So you have to ask yourself, are you putting quiz questions in for a reason, or are you doing it just because you're expected to or to check a box? If you're just putting them in there because you always have, then you probably aren't helping you or anyone else all that much. If you're putting them in there to have them actually practice what they were taught, then great. That's a good reason to use an assessment. But if not, then don't. Remember, working adults don't want their time wasted, and they don't have the patience to answer 10 multiple choice questions that they're going to forget within the hour. They want to show they learned something instead, which is by far a better metric anyway. Plus, it's just more efficient in getting learners to retain the material we want them to learn, and wasting their time with a bunch of assessment questions probably won't do that. So be more judicious. Well, guys, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please consider liking and subscribing. It helps tremendously and attracts more people to the channel. And trust me, as well, the algorithm likes it a lot too. But for now, I've been Kevin, and I will see you in the next video.